Thank you for joining me on this week's Tell Us How to Make It Better podcast. In my documentary film, The Last House Standing, we featured a house in Mexico Beach, Florida that survived Hurricane Michael in 2018. And while we were there, we interviewed the mayor, Cathy. If you watch the film, you'll see his comments at the time about what they were experiencing in the aftermath of a Category 5 hurricane that wiped out a good part of Mexico Beach. His job of being mayor of a charming little beach town turned into having to be part of a massive cleanup and rebuilding program. So I decided to reach out to Mayor Cathy to see how he's doing today and how the rebuilding is coming along. He was recently defeated in the mayor's race this spring as the town decided to go in a different direction. But I think you'll find it very interesting to hear all that he and the town have gone through in their effort to rebuild and try to get back to a normal life. I'm George Siegel, and this is the Tell Us How to Make It Better podcast. Your home is probably your biggest investment, and every week we show you warning signs and solutions to help you protect it. Tell Us How to Make It Better is partnering with the Readiness Lab, the home for podcasts, webinars, and training in the field of emergency and disaster services. Al, thank you so much for joining me today.
Glad to do it.
Now, first off, sorry about the election and how that didn't work out. Good and bad. I mean, you went through a lot as mayor. How do you feel after all that?
I'm good with it. It's sort of after 16 years, I have nothing to back up from. I'm good with it. People here after the storm, we got we got new people in town, and maybe they wanted a little change or wanted. But as far as what I've done and been a part of some great teams of people to put our city back together, I'm very proud.
Now, for people that are watching the podcast as opposed to listening, I'm putting in some of the drone footage that we shot after Michael. It really was unbelievable. If you weren't actually there, the video doesn't even do it justice. Describe to people what it was like immediately following the hurricane when you walked outside in your town.
A Floridian in Mexico Beach, as long as I've been, hurricanes are sort of you learn to cope with them. You learn to deal with them. Michael was certainly a different storm, and what it did to our city is very, very difficult even to put into words. We were the bullseye for a Category 5. 19 feet of storm surge, 160 mile an hour wind, old Florida town, old slab on grade houses. And it just simply took 85% of every structure was either inhabitable or destroyed.
Now, what I always find is amazing when you see people that get elected for an office or they're in an office, and then something happens that you never in a million years would have expected to have to deal with. And all of a sudden, you're the mayor of a catastrophe and having to face what was going on there. What was that like for you? Did you ever wake up and go, God, I want to get the heck out of here. This is nothing I want a part of.
Yeah, that was a tough part for me. As a business owner, we lost our business. Both of my sons lost their homes. Our town was laying literally in a pile, and I'm the mayor. And the day before, I was dealing with potholes in the road, and maybe the trash didn't get picked up. And all of a sudden now, you wake up to the reality of that your city is in dire need of a lot of leadership, and it was a difficult thing for a couple of days for me to get my hands around that. Like I say, our business was laying down, our sons' homes were laying down, our city was laying down. There's a lot to deal with when you aren't equipped. Never had no idea what FEMA disaster recovery was like. Never dealt with anything like that. So it took me a few days to come to grips with how to assemble our city, how to assemble our business, how to assemble our family. And I think in the end, we proved that resiliency and heart and stamina, it'll take you a long way.
Now, it's pretty easy to be an armchair quarterback after a disaster and say, you could have done this, you could have done that. My contention is that most people don't really, first of all, think that it's going to happen to them, especially Floridians. I'm not a lifelong Floridian. I wish I was. I moved here in 2017 and I love Florida. But there's an attitude here that people think it's just going to miss us. Or if it does, it won't be as bad as what we've seen from Michael and now from Ian. And we saw from Irma. I mean, where those things hit, there's major damage. Do you think you guys were just totally unprepared, just not thinking it would ever be that bad?
No, we were not unprepared. We were as prepared as a small town that had always skirted major storms could be. The old Florida style of Mexico Beach, simply, we weren't built to withstand something like Michael. The only good thing, if you can somehow categorize that as good, is that the people, we had 4 fatalities, which to me, there was like 125 people that stayed in town. It's almost a miracle to me that, and I don't want to in any way underscore the 4 fatalities, but that we didn't have more is remarkable. Our structures here simply weren't. There was hardly any new. The new structures that were here survived, but we just weren't built for a Michael. There was just no way. Our whole coastline, our whole city coastline, took the effect of a hurricane, a Category 5 storm, and we're not very deep. And our 3.5 miles of coastline, the structures on those, just I call it, you draw the short straw. In Florida, sometimes that happens to you. But the strength of these storms now, George, is different. I mean, this isn't we're talking about a very, very tightly wound storm that Mexico Beach was ground zero. We just didn't have a chance. We didn't have a chance.
Yeah, no, that was obvious by seeing it in person a couple of times when I was up there. And when I talk about preparation, what I mean when I say unprepared, I don't mean unprepared from the sense of, how you would handle it afterwards, but just what's amazing to me is that people don't seem to be as concerned about how their house would survive a major disaster. Do people evacuate? Do they have the right insurance? What are some of the things you find out after the fact of how the residents had to go about putting their lives back together? Did you think they were prepared themselves, not as a community, but as individuals?
No. If you look at us, and I've talked to several down in the Fort Myers area that dealt with Ian, or still dealing with Ian. People, they do become complacent as Floridians, because in Mexico Beach, just as a live example, for me, we didn't leave. Our family did not leave Mexico Beach. We stayed in our home. Now that comes from years of, it'll go somewhere else. It'll miss us. It'll almost get here, but it won't. So you do become complacent. And then, by the grace of God, you have what we experienced in Michael, and you survive it. You think, wow, maybe I need to rethink this next time. But during the buildup of the storm, we had close to 200 or 300 people that said they were going to stay, even though we had mandatory evacuation. Now, by the time the storm hit, that number had dwindled, because during the night, on Tuesday night, it greatly intensified and took more of a direct. You could see the line that it was taking. But yes, the being unprepared is more of a mental thing. I mean, you can put plywood on your windows, and you can tape your doors, and you can, get your outdoor trash cans and take care of your property, but you can't prepare for 160-mile an hour and 19 foot of storm surge. You can't do it.
Now, I wish there was a statistic that people could pull on when we talk about what is your cost of a hurricane? What is your cost of damage? Because it's much more than just the physical structure of your house and your immediate life being uprooted. For some people, they never recover from it. It could be 5-10 years. It could be forever until you get life back to normal. So the cost is really, it's almost impossible to calculate, isn't it?
Oh yeah, yeah. The putting in our demographics, we were a large percentage of military retirees, people who were settled in their life, and a redo, a start over, is difficult for that type of person. Uh, and that's what happened here. A lot of our 65 plus year old people, just they wanted to start over, but not. They wanted to be closer to family. They didn't want to go through the hassle, the insurance hassles, the rebuild hassles. Uh, so they unfortunately, we lost some very, very good people that had been long-term Mexico Beach people. Not that we don't have some good ones coming in, but it's sort of been a little change in our demographics, and COVID can also contributed to that.
Sure. That's like getting a double or triple whammy when you're having a bad time. Now, movies don't really do disasters justice. Well, actually, it's a huge injustice because you see the disaster in a film, and then at the end, they're all optimistic, like life is going to go back to normal. Everybody's going to be good. It's not that way, is it?
No, the adjustment period for some is more traumatic than others. For our family, I mean, we've been here, lived here, raised here, make a living here. We knew where our roots were, and we were gonna overcome Michael. But for many others, the length of time that it takes to, especially if you have to deal with the darn insurance people, it's in Mexico Beach. Some people are still dealing with insurance claims. Uh, the disaster part, the FEMA part, it sounds great initially. It sounds, these people are going to come in here and take care of you, and you're going to get this, you're going to get that. Well, it doesn't. It doesn't work that way. It sounds good, but the process of getting disaster relief is extremely stressful. So for some, they throw their hands up. They either walk away or they just take what they can get and move, to a non-coastal area. But it's certainly not. The picture isn't always, the process, I should say, is not always as bright and pretty as what you see, especially soon after the storm.
Yeah, just the cleanup alone. You were talking about the budget. The amount you had to spend on cleanup so far exceeded what, for years of budget. I don't think you ever would have had a budget that high to clean up that kind of mess.
We were close to 50. I mean, our annual budget was running $3.5-4 million. Our just our debris cleanup was $50 million. So
that's crazy. That's hard to imagine. Now, during the process, when you go to rebuild, what I found was amazing. Okay, you got hit by a Category 5 hurricane, but the building code didn't change to withstand another Category 5 hurricane. Do you think the building code was made tough enough in the wake of such a big disaster?
Yeah, we went to 140-mile-an-hour wind code here, and that was really just a slight change from where we were at 130. The biggest change for Mexico Beach was our elevation, our flood elevation. Most everything now on the south side of 98 is all on piling. And of course, that changes what we look like. When you're used to seeing driving through town and you see all these slab on grade houses, and now everything is elevated. So I think now we are a Category 5 comes to Mexico Beach. What we've done in the last 5 years, you would see minimal damage because we're practically brand new. under new codes, under new elevation requirements, everything now. I don't think you would see piles of debris from homes literally being washed away. I don't think you'd see that.
Sure. What I'm more talking about is, the building codes in South Florida, down in Miami, Broward County, that area, are the toughest that there are. Though I think the wind rating there is 170 miles an hour. I mean, why not is it just unaffordable to go that high?
Yeah. It makes, the Miami is the toughest that I am aware of in the country, not just Florida, but anywhere. So we talk to the FEMA people, and you have to remember, to get FEMA assistance, you have to make some adjustments to what you put back. They aren't going to pay for the same disaster again if you don't do anything different. So we were in dealing with them and looking at our flood maps, looking at our how we were going to, what our code requirement was going to be for elevations. We felt like, and they felt like, that was reasonable. If you get what Miami has, you start literally pricing people out of their home, their ability, because they weren't insured. A lot of people just simply are underinsured. They couldn't put back, they couldn't come close to putting back what they had. If you were to elevate the building code to say what they call now the Miami-Dade building code, just wouldn't, it would not be practical for Mexico Beach to have done that.
Well, I've heard some experts argue then maybe you shouldn't build there. I mean, it's such a scary thing right now in Florida. We have trouble in Tampa, a lot of people not able to get homeowners insurance. And I imagine after you've been hit by such a disaster, a lot of insurance companies leave. They don't want to touch it. So are people that are rebuilding to 140 miles an hour, are they taking a risk in your opinion? Or is it's just, hey, it is what it is. We live in Florida, but somebody's got to pay for that risk.
Well, the insurance industry in Florida it's just well documented. It's hard to find property insurance. Citizens is the state carrier, and a lot of people, including ourselves, myself, we would prefer not to deal with Citizens. The insurance companies are making, the few that are left, and if you have to deal with the state insurance carrier, which is Citizens, you really, the options are pretty slim, and it's difficult, very, very difficult for moderate income families that want to live in a coastal area to be what I call properly insured. It's difficult to do. Same with the business.
It's tough. And I've read some articles that say the areas that are most risky should bear the greatest cost of the risk, because it's not fair for somebody who lives inland to have to pay more because somebody else wants to live by the beach. I don't know. I wrestle with this kind of stuff all the time just because how much ridiculous money I'm throwing away every month on homeowners insurance. What are your thoughts about the people who are in the riskiest areas pay more money?
I guess that's an argument. If you don't live on the coast and you think that your insurance is being influenced by those, or the price of your insurance is being influenced by those who live on the coast, and you're helping supplement someone, I can. That's a valid argument if you want to have it, but I don't know that the insurance companies. Uh, I think they have to pool their money and hope for the best. I
Yeah.
don't know how else to do it in Florida.
Yeah, it's a crazy industry, and especially if you think about their goal is not to pay you, right? If,
Oh yeah.
if they
Oh yeah.
if they if they can find a reason not to pay your claim, they're not going to pay it.
Yeah. It's been my dealings with insurance now, not me personally, in terms of my business, but for so many of my buddies and friends in Mexico Beach and many of our citizens, some of the it's just simply been a nightmare dealing with the flood and the wind. The wind sort of the chicken and the egg. The wind doesn't want to pay because that was flood damage. The flood doesn't want to pay because they claim that was wind damage. And the poor customer or the homeowner sitting in the middle trying to decide how to navigate this insurance nightmare. Uh, and it's just really difficult and very, very stressful to do
I
that.
can't even imagine what you guys were living through. And then this past year, when you see what happened with Hurricane Ian, most people in Florida have been down at one point or another to Sanibel or Captiva Island, and they know how spectacular that area was, and hopefully will be again sometime soon. What were your thoughts when you saw that happening?
I was heartbroken for them. You never what I saw the morning after Michael is something that no mayor, no citizen, no homeowner, no one wants to see their life in a pile of rubble from a disaster. Uh, Unfortunately, it's happening way too often, or more than we're used to. And when the Ian thing happened for Fort Myers and Sanibel, I just sat down and you can't help but let those memories flash back of what we here went through. So uh, I don't know that city. I think or that area of Florida was also one of those that had skirted disaster for years. So I, they weren't prepared in terms of the type of structures that they had there. You could tell just from the TV pictures. Uh, and I don't know how those people will. I mean, some of those, especially large number of mobile home parks, old Florida homes, some of those, I don't know how those families will recover financially to stay there. I don't know that they'll be able to do that like us. I mean, we lost people that no longer could afford to have a quote beach house or a home along the Gulf of Mexico, uh, and they're much more populated than us. And I sort of my heart breaks for them. I don't know how they're going to do that.
And when you see reports of how assessments after the hurricane since then, and the newer structures, as you mentioned in Mexico Beach or around your area, newer things held up a lot better than older structures. So when you look at Florida as a whole, is there a thought maybe we have to go in and find subsidies or whatever so people can beef up their homes in a way that this doesn't keep happening? Because you can't just wait for an area to get wiped out and start over, do you? You just keep hoping that it doesn't happen to you?
Yeah, I don't think there's a program that say you go in and do preventative maintenance in terms of beefing up a structure. I don't know how you would do that. Uh, I think as Mexico Beach and the Fort Myers area and Sanibel Island, I think that you have to think, well, we paid that price and we won't, we'll do better when we rebuild and we'll be better prepared. But I don't know how you would take a coastal community, and do any type of preventative hurricane measures. And you have to remember, if there's a significant difference in dealing with a Category 2 and a Category 5. So when you say you have to hope for the best, I think for those of us living here, you have to hope for the ones and the twos and the threes, because you can overcome those. The
Sure.
fives, you're gonna. I think as they say, if you're gonna dance, you're gonna have to pay the fiddler, and I think that's what happens with a
Yep.
five. You have to pay.
As Professor Joseph Barbera said in my film, The Last House Standing, he goes, hope is not a strategy. And there's certainly a risk with that mentality. When you look at Ian, we thought for sure in Tampa we were going to get just pummeled by
Right.
it. And if Ian had hit here, it would have wiped out a huge part of this area. So now as you're watching this hurricane season, the water is so warm in the Gulf and around Florida. And they just predicted that because it's an El Nino year, experts were saying there was a 30% chance of excessive storms. Now they raised it to 60. Are you fearful for how the rest of this hurricane season is going to go?
Oh yeah, yeah. I've been. I was asked multiple times in the 12 months after Michael about global warming, and I'm not a scientist. Here's what I know. I know that we are seeing stronger, more powerful storms than we've ever seen. Something is happening here in our global world, uh, and with the warm water at an all-time high. I'm talking about never seen water temperatures, and that's the fuel for hurricanes. So certainly it's something we all have to pay attention to, and I think for us in Mexico Beach, our antennas during this time of year, we stay more in tune now than we used to.
Do people
And I'm
forget? I
sure.
mean, I know when you have the kind of damage you do, I know the blow-bys and the ones like when Irma skirted Tampa, we had first moved here, and people just went phew and moved on. But when it actually hits you and destroys your community like Michael did,
Yeah.
does that feeling get numbed after a while, or are you reminded of it every day when you drive around?
Well, let me put it this way: 5 years, it hasn't removed any of my feelings about storms. I feel different today about being more in tune with what's going on in the Gulf of Mexico from a storms perspective. I don't want to get caught with that, like we talked about earlier, just that complacency of, well, it's Florida, it's a hurricane season. Well, it changes your life now. The power of these storms is not what we were used to seeing. There's been very few of them. I mean, even Katrina back in the 80s, in the 70s. And so it's, for me and for Mexico Beach, I guarantee you, people here, when they start hearing or seeing things on the TV about a disturbance in the Gulf, we're all on board. Our antennas are up. We're paying attention.
I can imagine. Now, give me a glimpse behind the curtain because we're making another film about building and structures and building code. So when you guys are having those meetings talking about rebuilding, is the construction industry lobbying to keep the standards down, or do you think they were on board in your community saying, no, let's make it tough?
No, they were. We were trying to be practical. Usually, after any type of event like a Michael, if you aren't careful, the pendulum will swing one way or the other too far. And we sat here and tried to be the most practical way to prevent the most damage or the least damage that we can, and still allow people to come back and be part of wonderful Mexico Beach. So that's what we did. And we did that with FEMA graces. Now they were involved in our process of, like, the elevation. They were involved in the restructuring of the flood maps. So again, practical horse sense, so to speak, of what you can do with what you have. Uh, it's not a matter of the state going to buy all the land on the coast. That's not going to happen. We're going to have to deal with hurricanes, and better building codes are going to make a big difference. But in Mexico Beach, our building codes, we were pleased, and I guess we won't know how well we did until we have another, until they're tested. But we think we're much better prepared.
Yeah, hopefully you won't get tested for quite some time. But my question is more the construction industry, builders themselves, they have a lobbying group that tries to fight standards being made tougher. And I was wondering if they tried to exert that kind of influence, saying,
Oh,
"No, we should lower the standard."
no, we didn't have we did not have anyone here, any group here that came to our city to try to sway us from a building perspective one way or the other.
Okay, well that's good to hear. So, what advice would you have for anyone who lives in a coastal town, whether it's Florida, along the Gulf Coast, anywhere, Alabama, Mississippi, Texas? What would you tell them that they really need to have on their mind as we head into the peak of hurricane season?
Well, I said it before. It's what I think what I've done. I've become more, you sort of become more in tune with what's going on in the Gulf. Uh, and you don't need to panic, but you need to know that you've got a place to go or be prepared to leave. Uh, and don't let your pride. I mean, there's nothing to be gained by saying I rode out a huge storm. I mean, that ego thing is long past. I mean, you just have to see what has happened to see that if you stay, you have to know you're in a good place or the best place. Don't and be more be more prepared mentally to gather the things so that you have time to some things that you wouldn't want to lose, that you wouldn't want you, and that's going to be determined by the type of structure you're living in, or that you're, or where you would go. But more importantly, and I do it, I pay more attention to the weather people now. I pay more attention to the squiggly lines that we all are used to seeing, and uh, I don't take for granted that they're going to be wrong. Let me put it that way. So I
Yeah,
think that's
I agree with you. I mean, I'm somewhat fearful. Just today, there was supposed to be very little chance of rain here in Tampa, and all of a sudden I heard it pouring outside my house. And then the forecast said it's just going to be for a few minutes. And then a half hour later, it was pouring again. It's like, well, if we're not getting this right, how are we going to know that that storm is going to be predicted accurately?
well, I think the weather people, prior to, there was a little sensationalism that went with reporting the weather. You'd see people out in the blowing stormy rain, holding their hat and saying, "Hey, we're here in Mexico Beach and the weather's turning." I, I think now they're more interested in getting in giving the information, and being the sensationalism. I think needs to go away, and they need to just simply tell us. I mean, we've got supposedly equipment and data that can, but a storm is so unpredictable. I think I mean, on Mother Nature, it'll fool you. And Michael could have been 50 miles one way or the other, and Mexico Beach would have been fine. But you know, short straws, and you got to have heart and stamina to live in Florida now. You're going to have to hang in there.
Well, you certainly did. What's ahead for you now that you're not mayor anymore?
Oh, I'm enjoying our business is built back. We got up a new, we're a family business, and I'm hoping that our town will see more. We're sort of slow on our businesses coming back, but the town, there's just a good feeling about Mexico Beach in terms of recovery. And for me personally, I've got 4 grandkids, and I'm enjoying seeing them more.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate you jumping on with me, Al.
Sure.
Yeah, I just can't even imagine what it's been like there. I mean, because I left there shocked, and I was only there for a handful of days, but you guys have really gone through a lot.
You haven't seen us in a while, have you?
I have not. I had a friend that came up there. He went there a few summers ago and said it looked really good. Things were great.
Yeah.
I want to get back up there because it's such a great area.
Amazing. It's amazing. It's amazing the recovery that we have that our town has gone through, and of course we're continuing. It's not in any, but we look fresh. We look like a happy town. We look like a good, strong, stable Mexico Beach. You don't see. I mean, sure, those of us around that remember, but in terms of riding through our city now, you can't help but think. Some would ask, well, wow, was there a storm here? So that's a good sign. That's a great sign.
That is a great sign. Let's hope for an easy end to hurricane season too, but it looks scary, doesn't it?
It does. It really does. Good talking to you.
Thanks, Al. Thank you for joining me today. My documentary film, The Last House Standing, featured Al right after Hurricane Michael hit Mexico Beach. And it shows people what happens when we build houses in risky areas. As my way of saying thanks for listening today, there's a link in the show notes so you can watch the film, The Last House Standing, for free. I hope you'll take advantage of it because there is important information in the film that will hopefully motivate you to do something to make your home safer. Now, if you have a story, good or bad, from home building or remodeling or being in a disaster, there's a link in the show notes to reach out to me and tell me about it. And who knows, you might wind up as a guest on an upcoming show. Thanks again for listening. See you next time.